So let's go ahead and start with, but there's this book called The Artist's Way, written by a woman in the 90s or something. I have my computer right here. I think her name is Julia Cameron. It was written in, it's funny when you Google this now comes up The Creative Act, A Way of Being, which is Rick Rubin's book. LOL. Okay, 1992, Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity, American author Julia Cameron. This book was written to help people with artistic creative recovery, which teaches techniques and exercises to assist people in gaining self-confidence and harnessing their creative talents and skills. Read pretty much only the first 2 chapters. But first things that she encourages you to do is write every morning, 3 pages, and write all of your goopy guck. Get out of your own way. Write something boring. Write something ugly. Writing, because sometimes I don't want to meditate, or I want a product of my morning routine, even though the product doesn't really go anywhere. But the fact that I can speak right now is probably because I wrote this morning. Anyway, this is the part that's annoying where you have to get it's 10:36 in the morning. So yeah, the point is daily pages. Get out of your own way in the morning. If it suits you. Another thing that I've been thinking about is, I guess everything sort of exists on a spectrum, right? And I think that our culture tends to think in duality consciousness. And what I mean by that is it's us versus them, or it's this or that, or it's Democrat or Republican, or it's, duality. And it's even the fact that we're a monotheistic culture, although theoretically the United States is not associated with a religion, but many of the main religions at this point in history are monotheistic, or what do they call it? Abrahamic, even. They come from the same descendants, as I like to call it, Daddy God. And the fact that we even have monotheistic, I'm painting with broad strokes, and I'm sure that there are sects within those Abrahamic or monotheistic religions that are more mystical or whatever. There's always is, right? There's always the mystical sect. And the mystical sect is usually more quietly, more matriarchal, or more storytelling-y, or more archetype-y. Basically what I'm driving at is a monotheistic daddy god religion is indicative of a dualistic culture. What I mean by that is that we see us as one side and we see God as the other side. That's a duality. Dualism, right? And I think there's something about dualistic culture where we worship our Santa Claus in the sky, daddy God. Obviously, I'm being oversimplifying. But it also sets up our culture to worship other things, to worship doctors, to worship entrepreneurs, to worship billionaires, to worship people with air quotes power, and give up our agency to them. And it serves the system, because the system doesn't actually have to be dictatorial. We're culturally conditioned to give up our power. I wonder what would happen if we questioned that just a little bit more. Okay, so there are, and this is yin and yang. When I took a intro to Chinese medicine class, the first concept, before we talked about 5-element theory, before we talked about, there were some theories that had to do with 12 parts that I never wrapped my head around, but maybe we'll come back to that someday. Before we talked about any other theory, we talked about the first dichotomy theory, which is yin and yang, which is masculine and feminine, which is rising and falling, which is, I also like to think about the universe. Have you heard of this, that the universe is, or scientists say that the universe is constantly expanding, getting larger, and yet also there's this contractive force, which is gravity, which holds things together. It holds planets in orbit with each other, blah, blah, blah. The cool part about thinking archetypically, that is trying to distill from the stuff of reality, the fact that I'm sitting at this table in this place, in this apartment with these things, doing this thing, that's the stuff of this reality. And for some reason, I have a psychological disorder. I'm really curious about like, archetypical analysis, like kind of abstracting and zooming out and whatever. I think that also is the same thing as the like unlocking the creative mind, is like, okay, I can see that this is all the stuff of this moment, and it's not or, it's not but, it's and. There, I can see the stuff of this moment, and I'm curious about how can I abstract the stuffness and understand what is at play behind it or underneath it or something. Obviously, sometimes we can't get past the stuffness. Sometimes the stuffness is all consuming. But that's almost the point of having a practice, because a practice is meant to be boring, right? Like maybe your practice is sweeping the floors. Maybe your practice is brushing your teeth when you wake up. Practice is redundant, repetitive, boring, so that all of that stuffness becomes less stimulating. My yoga mat is the same smell every morning or whatever. This feeling is the same external feeling every morning, so that I can get more listening done on the inside to the kind of abstraction of it, the like, what's the stuff behind the stuff, right? And there are more complicated archetypical frameworks that we can talk about, and I love that. And the first of all archetypical frameworks is duality. I think everything starts with changing the way that people think. Seeing the earth as a living organism, seeing each other as not competition, seeing sometimes when I teach kids, smart kids get mad at me. Sometimes I substitute teach math classes, and I've had smart kids get mad at me because I'm going slow so that the slowest kid in the class can also be on the same page. I also teach yoga for kids, and it makes more sense in that context to go slow and make sure everybody's on the same page. But for some reason, when it comes to math class, it's more kind of like, yeah, well, we'll leave you behind if you're slow. But I don't think we realize, for some reason, our culture doesn't believe that we're only as strong as our weakest link. Individualistic culture, the same as dualistic. As a dualism, a culture that worships dualism, there's me and there's you. And cultures that are more advanced, I dare to say, more like multiplexed, more polytheistic, have space for all of the archetypes to play out their flavor. And in all of the, like, there's also a type of therapy called internal family systems, where we try and recognize our own mother, our own father, our own masculine, our own feminine, our own whatever, mean sister, If we can become a culture that sees more multiplexed, starts to try and abstract the way that complicated structures work with each other, multi-component systems, or we're seeing things as systems, and we're constantly looking at the relationship between things. We all need to become systems thinkers more. Here's the thing that I don't know how to do. And I think that's major key. I'm creating a chimera of 2 units. Oh no! Okay, good thing I just cracked this aux jack. It's okay, don't panic. We have another unit right here. We've been thinking pretty individualistically, as individuals or as nations or as companies or as whatever. Like, I hope that the next up is like more whole, more integrated, less individual in all aspects. all of this like theoretical ideas are like just that, theoretical ideas. And so it's also our responsibility, not only is it our responsibility to start trying to think, to see the world in systems thinking. It's my hunch, it's my theory that it would be beneficial to society if we became a little less dualistic or monotheistic or whatever, and a little more like expansive and accommodating and curious and non-judgmental and maybe, dare I say, like mystical, or like believing that not everything is a means to an end, that some things are